Thank you, boy. Granny bone. Oh no! So this week I'm really excited to confirm that I've launched my first ever Carpenter's Daughter merchandise range, and I'll leave a shop link to that below. But I really wanted to create something personal that I've created myself. Rather than sending you over to Spreadshirt or Teespring, I wanted to learn the whole process as well, and I have wanted to for the last 2 years. And this is my new t-shirt range. Don't know if you can see that properly, but I've shortened it to TCD, otherwise it'd be quite a long design, with a hammer and a dog biscuit in the shape of a bone, and Hans. And this is actually Hans's dog paw. It's a copy of his paw from a few projects ago in the dog kennel video. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this process. So I've been thinking about this for quite a while though, for 2 years. And originally I've done a lot of research, and I bought the photo emulsion to do your own screen printing. But getting that to develop in the right conditions with the right light, it was so hazy with all the videos that I'd been checking out and all the research I've done. I'd also bought some drawing fluid instead of doing that method, and you can paint your own design and then use it as a screen print. I've never ever opened these boxes, but then I decided to try, and absolutely loved the lino cutting method, which is colour blocking or letter pressing, if you like, directly onto fabric or prints. And I loved the carving process as well. But I also wanted to share this as a YouTube project for anyone who can't necessarily afford a t-shirt, who wants to try something for themselves, with some offcuts of wood, because you could do that, or for other YouTube makers who want to try this method and hopefully get more financial support to their channel rather than more money going to Teespring and things like that. So yeah, if you don't want to watch this video, then that's fine. I'll leave a link to the shop link below, and I'll catch you in my next week video. But hopefully this is going to be useful for a lot of people. So the first thing you're going to need is a design. And I'd been debating about something for the last year, until randomly I thought, why not use Hans's dog paw print that I used to router out for his dog kennel plaque. So if you haven't seen that, he'd walked over some plywood sheet, I took a photo, painted it black, then I started playing around with adding text on it on iPicky.com, or you could use PicMonkey, whatever you want, or just draw something out on paper. But for the hammer and bone, I created those basic images in Paint and then overlaid those while I was in iPicky as well. So there's so many different ways you could do this. And once I'd got the design I wanted, I printed it on plain paper because I'm going to pencil it in later. Next, you're going to need to pick your type of lino to carve. Now, I couldn't find anything locally, so I ordered all these ones online just so I could touch them, get an idea. But the Battleship Grey one, far left, is your traditional lino. And I'd heard it can be quite tough to carve out, and you'd have to heat it up with a hairdryer or even sit on it, and it can deteriorate over time. Then you've got the middle one, which is a cheaper one. It's like a thin rubbery tyre, I would say, but it's quite dark, so I was worried I wouldn't be able to see what I was carving out. I was very attracted to the clear one, but I didn't like the feel of this one, and I can imagine it being difficult to see where you've carved. So I decided to go for the soft cut one, far right. Obviously I had a bigger piece than this, and apparently this is one of the easier ones to use. And also read it's less likely to deteriorate. So if I'm going to invest my time in this, then I'd rather go with something that lasts. Here's my Hans paw print logo, and I need to transfer this to the lino. And there's various ways you could do this, but I'm using tracing paper, made sure it was firm on a clipboard with masking tape, and then I drew around the paws and all the lettering with a 2B pencil. Or you could draw your design straight onto paper, then place it down on your lino. That way you're telling the lino to mirror it. So your first design is the right way round, you're transferring it to the lino to be the wrong way round, and by the time you put it on your t-shirt downwards, it corrects itself. That's so important if you've got text. I'm also doing a few squiggles on the areas that I knew I didn't want to carve out. So once you've done all of your detail, obviously the more intricate the logo, the harder it will be. I also only did black and white to keep things simple. Then I firmly secured that down to the top of the lino. Then using the back of a spoon, you need to rub everywhere firmly, making sure everything is transferred to it. And occasionally I'd just double check if it was going all right because I'd never done this before. Then for possibly my most fun task was carving the lino. I've also seen this done successfully with wood, so if you've got an offcut, then it's worth giving it a go. So on the left, I've got what turned out to be my favourite Japanese wood carving tools, but there's a set on the right that were part of an SD lino cutting set. But don't forget, I'll leave all the links to things below. Now, to avoid any confusion, because I would have been devastated if I carved in the wrong area, I went over the dark edges with a micro pen because I was really worried about the pencil rubbing out with my hand. Although when I came to do Hans's little paw, I didn't actually have that problem, but it really struggled going over pencil anyway, so I decided to use a permanent marker. And then it sort of dawned on me, I might actually have issues later with the texture of the marker pen showing up in the design. And that was a valid question because after a quick Google search, that has happened to some people. But I'd got to a point of no return and I just went for it and successfully removed it with terps later. I might have been lucky with using soft cut, but I just did not want to carve any of this area. Then it was time to make my first carving, and I was really excited about this. And I first used this V-shaped carving tool from the SD set, and it had wings, and I really felt comfortable with it. I was going to use that red corner piece thing if I struggled with it slipping all over the place, but the texture underneath and the wooden OSB surface seemed to do the job. So that was another thing that I didn't use from that SD set. I also found it really comfortable just rotating the piece as I'm carving, so I'm also making sure I didn't carve towards my hands. But I first started with the outline of the paw print and then the detail of the fonts. Then I moved on to the very fine V-shaped carving tool from the Japanese wooden set, and this one was my favourite. And for any areas where I needed to remove more within the font area, I'd then move on to the finest gouge carving tool. Now, one of the things that I fell in love with about the lino carving is that you can go with the flow. You can tweak things as you're going along, and I was originally just going to have this paw print, no other detail, and cut around it. But obviously, the more you cut away, you can't add anything back. So I decided to just have a play around, creating fur around the paw detail to see how I liked it, and if I didn't, I'd just carve it all away. And I find things like this much more natural than drawing it on a computer, and that's why I was drawn to this process. And it's strangely very, very therapeutic. And once I'd got to a point where I wanted to test it out with some basic ink on paper, this is when I thought it was best to try and wash out the permanent marker, which obviously didn't work out straight away, but it came off nicely with terps. For those in the US, it's actually a paint thinner. So when you're having fun, time flies, and now it's night time, so I'm using a head torch. This is just a simple test with the SD black ink that came in the set, the ink tray, and a hard rubber brayer. So if you're only doing prints on paper, you're meant to roll it back and forth either direction until it starts to get tacky, and then go over your lino cut. The idea is you need thin coats and layer it. If you put too much on, it just goes all in the cracks, and you want to avoid that. And then place the paper on top, and the cutting tool that turns into a baron, you go over that firmly in every direction, making sure you've got all your pattern, and then peel it off. And I definitely didn't put enough ink on there, but I am testing it in the dark. Now, after seeing my paw print on paper, it then gave me the idea of cutting a paw shape around it. And after drawing around it on the lino itself, I added a few pointy claws and started cutting it out with a craft knife. Although what I now know is easier is to carve away outside that line so it's thin enough just to cut with scissors. The other thing that I did do was leave a space either side and carved it out and not get ink on my fingers or mess the ink up on the lino before pressing it down on fabric. So something I didn't get on film because it took quite a lot of time was the amount of tests that I did with the pattern, using different rollers and sandwiching fabric inside the t-shirts because I'd been told that was the best idea. So I'm just going to quickly show you my trials and errors, and I decided to go for a screen printing ink called Permaset. You can cure it on the same day with a few techniques. But the first issue that I found is you can't use a hard rubber brayer because it'll leave a texture like this. Although I think it's cool, it's not the look I was going for. Also, I'd used the foam on my ironing board while it was on the ironing board, and the metal grid transferred through. So that was a key thing to me to avoid any textures underneath. And after so many hours of Googling, I found out that a foam roller was the best choice for this. But because it's an Australian product, finding the right one in the UK was tricky because some people said high definition rollers were terrible, others said otherwise. I think it really depends on the fabric you're using. So the first one I tested was this £10 SD textile roller from handprinted.co.uk. It was better because it had removed all of that random texture. However, I could still see it. But the benefit of this one is that it doesn't soak up as much of the ink, but I still wanted it to look good. But it also didn't look as dark as I wanted it to. I then tried it with padding underneath. It actually made it worse in this case. Then I tried a cheaper, very spongy foam roller from SD. You can see the black Permaset Aqua on the left and the more expensive Permaset Super Cover in white on the right. And it was quite patchy in places. I didn't like how it was skipping some of the detail. But overall, the B&Q was a winner for me. It seemed to be more consistent with all of the lino cuts and fabrics. The one on the left, I didn't have any padding. The one on the right, I'd used padding. So getting back to the padding, I actually found it worked better with a very thin cotton like this canvas bag. That in my opinion gave a much better transfer, but definitely not with a soft t-shirt cotton fabric. It's a very good idea just to practice on any old white top that you can find, or this was from a charity shop, before you go for gold. And before I bought any t-shirts in, I made sure I washed these tests because it was important to me that I'd make something that would withstand a wash. But I'll show you how to cure that later. So once I absolutely knew I was happy with the print and the quality of this ink, I bought a selection of t-shirts and hoodies, and I bought pure cotton pre-shrunk ones. I was told you've got to be really careful in case they've got starch in them. So it is a good idea to test wash them first before you do a whole batch. And to make life easier, I hung them all up on a clothes rail and steamed every one. I don't think I'd want to do this job without these. So I'll give you a recap of the tools that I'm using. I've got my lino cut, I've got a plastic ink tray, I've got Permaset ink. This is a Super Cover white, which is double the price of the black one, but this is designed to go over dark fabric. My cheap B&Q dial roller. I also bought replacements because I knew I'd be going from white to black. And a hard rubber brayer to apply pressure while the lino is down on the t-shirt. However, I've since learned that my icing sugar roller is so much better. I've got my small hands paw print, so I could offer a chest pocket print or one on the nape of the neck. And cleaning wipes. Occasionally you'll get ink where you don't want it, so definitely keep those at hand. Also, I didn't want to keep measuring the t-shirts all the time to get centre, so I made this quick jig using some scrap cardboard and my OmniGrid board, and this is the black Permaset ink. I'd say this is half as thick than the Super Cover. The other thing that you'll need is something to put in between the t-shirts so the ink doesn't go through. So I just folded some wallpaper up and taped it together. And for some reason I can't find the footage using my B&Q roller, so I'm just going to show you with my SD £4 foam roller. So I'd add a couple of dollops onto the tray, roll it back and forth to make sure I've got a good coat on it, but I didn't push down too much because I didn't want it to absorb too much of the ink. And then I'd go over my lino cut in every direction, making sure it was as even as possible. And it was very easy to catch the worktop with it, no matter how careful I was. So I'd get into a habit of cleaning it up as I went along and remove any off my fingers just in case. I also wiped it off the handles because I didn't want that to transfer to the t-shirt either. Then I'd place my t-shirt down, pop my folded wallpaper inside and smoothed out any of the creases. You may also need to go over it with a lint roller as well. Then I'd place my jig on top, find the centre line, fold the cardboard back, which also had a centre line, and notice I've got one on the back of my lino as well. Press it down and then go over it everywhere with a hard rubber brayer. If I saw any ink on the back of this, I'd get rid of it when I saw it as well. But as I mentioned earlier, I ended up favouring my icing sugar roller. And the moment you peel it off, you can either leave it to go touch dry naturally or speed up the process with a hairdryer, but we'll be ironing it to set it shortly. So that was a navy one, we're now on to black. And this one is using the B&Q roller. I much prefer this and I found it more of an all-rounder. And a quick go with the hairdryer and pop it to one side. Just a comparison, the left is the B&Q roller, the right is the SD roller. It depends what kind of look you want to go for. So I didn't want to just offer a big pour at the front. I also wanted to offer options of a little pour, but with a big pour at the back. And that's what I'm doing now. You'll also notice I cut away more of the pour because I kept getting ink on the bits I didn't want. Now I know I could have put this on a wooden block, but I wanted to keep its bendiness at the moment in case I wanted to put these on baseball caps. The other thing I want to point out that when you are pressing down on a t-shirt, you'll notice you'll leave like an embossed impression on the other side. That's not with ink, that's just from pressure of the lino. And to get rid of that, I just needed to go over it with a steamer. Now to cure your prints, and it's the same process with both the white and the black ink, I've got a tabletop ironing board here from IKEA, but I've also got a towel down because I don't want the metal ironing board grid to show through, which you'll probably be able to get rid of with pure cotton, but less likely if you're using synthetic fabrics. I've tried it with baking paper and a thin tea towel. And for pure cottons, I've got my iron on a cotton setting and I've set a timer on my phone for 3 minutes. If you're dealing with synthetics, then you need to lower your temperature and iron for longer. And I move around back and forth, reverse the t-shirt and repeat on the other side. However, if you really are short of time, I also trialled it in my tumble dryer for 25 minutes with my test printed old hoodie and that white top, and it still worked. So as long as you're doing enough tests, then I think you should be fine. So if you have any questions about any of this process, feel free to ask below. You'll also find the shop link below to a range of ladies and unisex t-shirts in navy, black and white, and some shopper bags. But what I forgot to say was that with each t-shirt sale, I'll also be donating £1 to the RSPCA, which is a pet charity here in the UK. And if you do buy any, feel free to tag me on Instagram at thecarpenters_daughter. And I think that's it. So hopefully you enjoy this video and I'll see you in my next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.